Hello and welcome to Mind Map HQ. Today we are diving into a truly phenomenal book, Morgan Housel's The Psychology of Money. We're going to unpack this powerful idea that when it comes to money, how you behave is way more important than how smart you are. It's a total game changer, so let's get right into it. So here's what we've got on the docket today. We're going to kick things off with a pretty incredible story about two very different fortunes. Then, we'll dig into the mindset that shapes our financial reality, the key behaviors that separate the rich from the truly wealthy, and the one strategy that beats almost everything else: time. Finally, we'll wrap it all up with the key takeaways and my final verdict on whether this book should be on your reading list. Okay, to really get the core idea of this book, you have to forget about spreadsheets and complex formulas for a minute. Instead, we're going to look at the real-life stories of two men whose financial lives could not have been more opposite. Okay, look at this. On one side, you have Ronald Reed, a janitor and gas station attendant who quietly built an $8 million fortune. And on the other side, Richard Fuscone, a Harvard-educated, high-powered finance executive who went completely bankrupt. So the question is, how in the world does something like that even happen? Well, Ronald Reed's secret wasn't some hot stock tip or a fancy degree. It was actually shockingly simple. He just saved whatever little he could, he bought shares in solid, well-known companies, and then he waited. He was patient for decades, living a quiet, humble life. And that patience allowed the magic of compounding to turn his tiny savings into that massive $8 million fortune. Now, Fuscone's story is the exact opposite. All his financial expertise, his Harvard MBA, none of it could save him from his own behavior. He got greedy, he took on massive debt to fund this ridiculously lavish lifestyle, including a mansion that cost, get this, over $90,000 a month just to maintain. It was a house of cards, and when the 2008 financial crisis hit, the whole thing just collapsed. You know, it's funny when you think about it. You would never, ever hear a story about a janitor performing surgery better than a top surgeon. It just wouldn't happen. But in the world of investing, stories like this happen all the time. And it perfectly proves Housel's main point. Managing money isn't a hard science. It's a soft skill where your behavior is the real key. So that sets us up perfectly for our first big theme, your mindset. This is all about getting to grips with the psychology of your own financial brain and realizing that your relationship with money is deeply personal and, let's be honest, often a little irrational. Housel's first big point is that our view of money is just incredibly narrow. And this quote on the slide just nails it perfectly. Our own tiny slice of life experience makes up like 80% of how we think the entire financial world operates. So what seems completely crazy to you might make perfect sense to somebody else. I mean, think about it. If you were born in the 1930s and lived through the Great Depression, you're going to view risk very differently than someone born in the 80s who grew up during a massive bull market. The point is, no one is actually crazy. We're all just making decisions that seem rational to us based on our own unique history with money. And this leads us right into two of the most powerful and overlooked forces in finance: luck and risk. As you can see, they're siblings. They are two sides of the very same coin, constantly reminding us that outcomes aren't always a direct result of our effort or our decisions. I mean, just take Bill Gates. Of course he's a genius, but we often forget about the incredible luck he had. He went to one of the only high schools in the world in 1968 that had a computer. And for every Bill Gates, there's a Kent Evans, his friend who was just as brilliant, but who was hit by the other side of that coin, risk, and tragically died before he can make his mark. So what's the financial lesson here? Well, first, stop trying to copy the Bill Gateses of the world. Their stories are often so full of extreme luck or risk that they're basically impossible to replicate. Instead, focus on broad, repeatable patterns of success. And second, you have to learn to forgive yourself. Sometimes you can make a great decision that still has a bad outcome. That's just risk. It doesn't mean you messed up. All right, now that we've got mindset down, let's talk about one of the most powerful and honestly counterintuitive ideas in the entire book. And that's the huge difference between being rich and being wealthy. And trust me, they are not the same thing. This whole idea really hinges on one powerful concept: knowing when to stop taking risks, knowing when you have enough. Housel tells this amazing story about Joseph Heller, the author of Catch-22. He's at a party, and a friend points out that the billionaire host made more money in a single day than Heller had earned from his massively famous novel in his entire life. And Heller's reply? It was just pure gold. He said, "Yes, but I have something he will never have: enough." So what's the real difference? Well, being rich is your current income. It's the stuff you can see, the $100,000 car, the giant house. It's spending money to show people how much money you have. But wealth is hidden. It's the assets that you haven't spent. It's the money that's working for you, giving you options and flexibility. As Housel puts it so beautifully, wealth is the nice cars not purchased, the diamonds not bought, the watches not worn. It's what you don't see. It's the financial assets that haven't been converted into visible stuff yet. And this brings us to what Housel calls the man in the car paradox, which is just hilarious because it's so true. When you see someone driving a Ferrari, you don't really think, wow, that driver is so cool. No, you think, wow, if I had that car, people would think I'm cool. We use other people's stuff as a benchmark for our own desires, not as a sign of their success. So the financial lesson here is pretty profound. True wealth is what you don't see. And the way you build it is by increasing the gap between your income and your ego. It's an act of humility. It's about suppressing that desire to show off today so you can have more freedom and control tomorrow. Okay, we've covered mindset and behavior. Now let's get into what might be the single most powerful strategy in all of finance. And spoiler alert, it has very little to do with being a genius stock picker. It has everything to do with time and survival. You've probably heard of compounding, but it really is like magic. It's like a tiny snowball at the top of a very, very long hill. You start with small, consistent investments, you give it a ton of time, and the results you get at the end can seem absolutely logic-defying. The growth itself creates more growth. And of course, the ultimate example of compounding is Warren Buffett. His fortune is just legendary, around $84.5 billion. But here's the really mind-blowing part. If Warren Buffett had started investing at age 30 and retired at a normal age of 60, his net worth would be under $12 million. That's 99.9% less. His skill is investing, sure, but his real secret weapon is time. He's been at it since he was a kid. And the only way to let time and compounding do their thing is to survive. You have to stay in the game. And here's the trick. Getting wealthy and staying wealthy require completely opposite skill sets. Getting it often requires taking risks and being optimistic. Keeping it requires humility and a healthy dose of paranoia that it can all disappear just as fast as it came. And surviving means understanding this phenomenon called long tails. Just look at this chart. It's pretty wild. Most individual stocks are duds. They either lose money or go nowhere. All of the market's returns come from a tiny, tiny fraction, just 7% of companies that become massive runaway winners. So what's the final lesson on strategy? It's that survival is the single most important financial skill. You need to arrange your finances in a way that you can take the hits, because the hits will come, and just stay in the game. If you can do that, you give yourself a real chance for compounding and one of those rare, huge wins to work in your favor. Okay, so let's pull all of these ideas together and wrap this up with the book's most powerful, most important takeaways. When you boil it all down, the philosophy is this. Focus on less ego, which leads to more wealth. Manage your money in a way that lets you sleep peacefully at night. Never forget that the best thing money can buy is control over your own time. Aim to be reasonable with your decisions, not robotically rational. And always, always leave room for error, because life is guaranteed to surprise you. All right, so now for the big question I'm sure you're asking. With thousands of finance books out there, is this one actually worth your time? I mean, let's be real. A lot of finance books can be dry, complicated, and honestly not that helpful. So does this one really break the mold? My answer is an absolute 100% yes. This is easily one of the best and most accessible books on finance I have ever read. It skips the complicated jargon and instead gives you timeless wisdom through incredible stories. It focuses on the one thing you can actually control, which is your own behavior. And hey, if you got some value out of this explainer, I would be so grateful if you could take a second to hit those like and subscribe buttons. It really helps the channel out and lets us keep making more deep dives like this one. I'll leave you with this one last thought from the book that I think just sums everything up perfectly. The real goal isn't just to have more money. It's to have the freedom that money can buy. The ability to do what you want, when you want, with who you want, for as long as you want. That, as Housel says, is priceless. Thanks so much for watching.